afternoon, good evening, all. It's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating not just to bring awareness and understandings around the reality of trauma, but I really want to get into the day-to-day understandings of what we can do to support ourselves and to improve the quality of our lives and to support a path of actual healing. Now, this is the next video in the adoption series, and this one is a difficult video to make and a difficult video to explain. So please keep that in mind and watch the whole video and don't jump to conclusions, because it is a triggering difficulty. What I have found within my own experience and with many, many other adoptees that I personally have met and known and spoken with, and as well as within the foster care side of things as well, is there's a large proportion of us that there's this physical barrier between us and everything. There's this isolation bubble, for want of a better analogy, that keeps us separate from everything. And it goes back as far as we can remember. And I want to discuss and talk a little bit about this so that we can start to understand what it is and its implications. There are many different theories around this. I believe it's an ecology of things. It's not one specific thing, and it is a directly attributed to the fog, to that infant survival state. And what I mean by this, or where this comes from, and my evidence for this, is the majority of adoptees that I know personally, and I've had many, many dealings with, talks and discussions with, and listening to the forums and groups and everything that I've done for many, many years, decades, is the adoptees that were never picked up or held by any biological family at birth, that were immediately taken, either placed for adoption or placed into foster care. These are the ones that this sense is most prevalent in. And I've also seen it with humidicrib. Those babies that were moved and placed in a humidicrib for medical reasons have a very similar thing. And it is partially healed because obviously when they come out of the humidicrib, their mother and father will hold them and take care of them. But also, it's still there. And those that are held by biological family at birth and are removed a little later on, it's still there in another layer. It is not as clear-cut of a barrier, but it is still there. I do believe this is a component of the fog. I do believe this is a neurological structure associated with preverbal and early childhood trauma. And I believe it comes down to neural shock, to that shutdown that an infant goes through when they're not required from the trauma of birth and are placed in boxes in cold rooms and all this stuff that happens to us. But also where none of the attachment processes are initiated, none of the pheromones exchanges between the birth mother and, the biological mother and the infant, and none of these processes take place. The nervous system goes into a schism, into a shock. And that doesn't go away. What we know and understand with trauma and threat states, when you are in a free state, that part of you gets compartmentalized, shut down, and put to a certain spot once you've moved past it. But it is still there, and it needs to be addressed and worked with to release that traumatic experience. So that's what somatic therapies and a lot of trauma therapies are trying to do. But how do you do that when it's at the point of birth? When it is fed by an ecology in utero? And that's where there needs to be a lot of discussions and understandings around this. I've tried to bring this awareness for several decades and have been shunned and dismissed by anything within the medical profession because they don't know how to address it. Rather than discuss it and work with it and explore ideas and potentials and possibilities, it's shut down because it's in the too hard basket. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to live with it. hence making this video. I do believe in time we can reduce it. I'm not going to say it can be completely healed because I've not seen it. And I don't want to put anything out on my channel or in anything I say that I've not personally witnessed. I'm not saying it cannot be completely healed. I believe in some traditional approaches within indigenous societies. If we go through those processes, I do believe you can. But I've not seen it. Not this particular part. But it's understanding its implications, which is also why I'm making this video, that it's not our fault. There is a barrier created because our nervous system is in shock, and every time we try to form a connection that goes a little beyond the surface, it meets that place of neural shock. Our nervous system hasn't learned how to create these connections, how to create the physical feeling of connecting and being part of. And that's the gap. That's the barrier. We need to find ways to teach our nervous system how to connect and how to feel the positives and the negatives and all the responses that are part of reacting with an environment. But we also need to find a way to heal that neural shock. They go hand in hand. This is why, as I said, we can partially heal it, or we can definitely work with it and improve it quite a lot. But the neural shock part is where the challenge lies. And hence, I would love for a lot more discussions out there in the world with all these experts in all these different fields around the neurophysiology and associations of trauma to come up with ways that we can. As I said, I do believe within certain indigenous traditions there are the resources and tools. I had high hope that the path that MDMA within healing trauma was going to take would be something that could be worked with, because it's the closest thing we've got to some of these more traditional pathways. But in most places, MDMA has been taken down a daily medication, a feel-good medication, rather than a tool to be used in healing the neurological, neurophysiological components associated with trauma. Teaching our nervous system to move past that threat state and how to respond in a better way. Teaching our nervous system how to be part of and what to feel and how to feel. To interpret all these things that our nervous system would have learned if we lived and grew up in a secure childhood. Teaching that through an actual therapeutic process. That's what I hoped MDMA would help balance that out, to where we wouldn't tip over into the threat state, teaching the nervous system in the beginning so that we can start to build that structure, that scaffold to build upon. But as this is not the case, we are back down to what we can do in our day-to-day lives. And the first step, as always, is being aware. When this barrier, I've lived it my entire life, and mine is really quite strong and palatable because of what I went through and how I was removed, trafficked, and sold. I know several other mixed race indigenous adoptees in my personal life that are at the same degree as me because of how they were taken and trafficked and sold. The same deal. And I see it as it ripples out in all the many, many stories of how children are brought into the world of foster care and adoption. So even ones that were voluntarily relinquished, there's still this observable distance, this barrier of where we more observe life rather than participate openly. As I said in the beginning, this is a component of the fog. This is a component of the survival trauma state that removing children does and creates. As I've said throughout this video, to work with it, we need to teach our nervous system how to, the interplay between all the different facets of being part of, how to respond and interpret and feel and enjoy being part of, and get that excitement and that play in the less extreme modes that come into the mix a lot for those that have gone through trauma. Teaching our nervous system to play, to have fun, and to relax in social interactions. That part we can work on. The other part we also need to keep in mind is at some point we need to start to find ways to work with that neural shock. Because the more we start to play, we will hit the trigger of that neural shock. And when we do, it's not easy. It's a sledgehammer. And we need to also talk ourselves through it, going, well, this is because of this. This is not this unknown thing. And quite often, I hesitate to say this, but what I've personally experienced, and I've seen it experienced in quite a few instances that I've been around adoptees that have gone through this experience, the sensation of when you hit that neural shock, the symptomology is almost identical to a heart attack. Now, if you have this symptomology, please still seek medical help just in case it is a heart attack. But it is almost identical to that huge, smashing chest pain, the restrictions in breathing, pain down the arm. It is very much a highly debilitating response when we hit that neural shock from the trigger of being removed and unrequited at birth. And it is brushed off as a panic attack. It is brushed off as a heightened anxiety state, but it is never looked at in a path to treat it. So when this happens, as I said, if you get this symptomology, please seek medical support. But also when and if in your case it's brushed off, well, you just had a panic attack, and you come from this background, understand it is more than likely attributed to that neural shock associated with your removal before placement. And it can be worked with to reduce it. As I said in the beginning of this video, this is a difficult one. I will definitely be doing more videos on this in the future. I'm just trying to structure them in a way that are useful. I just don't want to blurt out a bunch of, all this bad stuff. I'm trying to find ways and resources to work with this stuff, and also to move people towards that message me and how do I work with this. I got a huge list of videos that I want to bring up, but I'm not bringing them in because of that. I don't just want to point out all the bad stuff. I don't want to leave people hanging on the bad stuff. I just want to be able to at least offer something to support the process within it. So keep this in mind, that our nervous system needs to learn how to engage, the feeling part, the enjoyment, the play, all that stuff that happens with connection and healing attachment trauma. When you come from a removal base, particularly at birth, where you've not had that biological connection, your nervous system cannot be taught how to until it learns to bridge that gap. We need to go back to the very basics and the very beginning to teach our nervous system to bridge that gap, or to diminish the width or breadth of that gap. We need to teach our nervous system how to feel. And we can't do it as an adult. We need to do it in the ways that an infant learns, because that's where the trauma is stuck. When we go through a traumatic experience, that block remains at the age when the trauma happened. Well, that trauma happened at the point we took our first breath. We need to go back to those early stages and work with it. The next video, I'll bring up some suggestions, because this one's getting a little long. But as I said, this one's a very difficult area to talk about because there's not a lot of understanding around it. So please keep that in mind in watching this video, and I'll do the next few videos to expand upon this, so I don't leave you guys hanging. I love you guys' comments and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, please be respectful, and I'll see you all next time.